guys, my name is Michelle Tyler and I'm a criminology student here at the University of Florida. In this video, I'm going to discuss and examine the morality of the current method used to carry out legal executions, which is the lethal injection. Within this, I shall also examine a recent case involving issues with administering the lethal injection and how it brings into question how much pain these individuals experience during the procedure. Taking all of this into consideration, I shall then apply the utilitarian perspective introduced in this course in order to determine if these procedures being carried out are moral enough in nature. For decades, capital punishment has been the center of controversy and debate across the nation, spurring both individuals who staunchly support the practice and those who unwaver in their belief that it is immoral and unethical. However, I bring this point up to clarify that while the topic at hand does involve capital punishment, or commonly referred to today as the death penalty, the issue at hand does not debate whether or not these individuals sentenced to death in a court of law have the right to live. Here, I am examining whether or not the potential consequences that may result during the lethal injection process are morally justifiable. A major source of concern for the leading method of execution used today, lethal injection, has the potential for error in both the chemicals used and the procedure itself. One recent incident that highlights this matter is the botched execution of Clayton Lockett in April of 2014. Lockett, an Oklahoma death row inmate, reportedly died of a heart attack at least 40 minutes after the cutoff of his execution. A vein failure led to serious complications in which the drugs administered didn't have the needed effect, leaving Lockett convulsing uncontrollably on his gurney. Speculation is not limited to just the methods and procedures, however. The chemical's effects are questionable as well. Sodium thiopental, yes, that is the name, which is used as an anesthetic agent during executions by lethal injection, is drawing speculation in regards to how long it keeps the inmate unconscious during the execution. In one study of the thiopental concentrations found in the blood of a set of executed inmates in North Carolina, it stated that many of the executed inmates had post-mortem thiopental blood concentrations that, if taken as a marker for thiopental concentrations of the inmates while they were still alive, would not be considered to hold the inmates in a state of anesthesia. Additionally, 43% of inmates were found with concentrations that indicate that they would have been conscious throughout the procedure. This suggests that consciousness is actually plausible in the inmates during the final steps of an execution. In order to better understand the procedure of an execution via lethal injection, I shall explain the procedure in the order of injections. At the beginning of the process, the inmate is strapped and secured onto a gurney and set up with an IV placed in each arm by trained personnel and offered a form of painkiller in Valium. The inmate is then administered a total of 8 injections that are given in the order I name them, with 2 injections of each of the 3 major chemicals along with 2 saline injections. The first chemical, a supposedly lethal dose of sodium pentothal, which is another name for sodium thiopental, is administered to put the inmate under anesthetic and effectively rendering them unconscious. The second chemical is called pancuronium bromide, which in this case is used to cause muscle paralysis. The final chemical used is potassium chloride, causing the inmate's heart to stop beating. The 2 saline injections are administered between the 3 chemicals being given as a flushing agent. And while the doses are labeled as lethal in dosage, based on past accounts, it can be said that there is a potential for error, either in a chemical manner or a failure in administering it, i.e. a human error. From a legal standpoint, this could possibly be considered a violation of the 8th Amendment, which legally protects citizens from cruel and unusual punishment. After being introduced to the principles the utilitarian follows through this course, however, I can examine an interesting moral question that these potential errors present. Although these inmates being executed can possibly suffer during the process, are any pain and suffering they experience morally justifiable? A utilitarian, by definition, always chooses the action that brings upon the least amount of negative utility. Utility in this context refers to sensations and consequences. An example of these are pain, pleasure, happiness, suffering, etc. Higher utility indicates happiness and pleasure, while lower utility generally means negative sensations such as pain and suffering. A key belief held by utilitarians is that the right thing to do is the action that brings the most good for everyone. This concept is the most important to consider when addressing the morality of the potential suffering inmates experience during execution via lethal injection. A common argument that, for the sake of this point, we can apply here, that is for capital punishment in general, is that executing these criminals removes them from society and thus benefits us as a whole. A counterargument for this would be that the suffering of the men is not moral enough to justify the benefit to society, as they are also human beings that have rights. And applying these utilitarian principles, the suffering of the inmates would be classified as negative utility. Another thing a utilitarian would address in this scenario is that in order to strive for the right actions that benefit society the most, it is crucial that we as human beings are impartial in our decisions. Excuse me. And since the good of the society outweighs any suffering on the inmate's part, any utilitarian would agree that these potential consequences are morally justifiable. In applying these principles behind utilitarianism towards a scenario regarding the potential effects during a lethal injection, helped me view the problem in a different manner because it provided a different angle to work with. Almost every argument revolving around capital punishment begins with the issue centered on whether or not these people have the right to live. From a utilitarian perspective, it makes me address the situation as to whether what happens during an execution is okay, not the fact that they are being killed. This perspective brought to my attention the fact that it doesn't matter whether we question if it is okay to kill them, since we already are, and according to present laws, executions will continue to be carried out regardless of popular debate today. The real issue lies with whether or not an individual's subjective experience outweighs the benefit of everyone else. And as an added note, I am not making any notion that agrees with either side for or against capital punishment. The contents of this video is purely for philosophical purposes.